to getting ahead, not just getting a job. We're back in the studio with our panel of caring experts on doing more than just going on a job search. And we're all here. We've been talking. We left the last podcast talking about our circle of connectivity. That is, people who are close connections that we could just pick up the phone, punch their number in, call it, and go, hey, and they know who we are. Then you have extended connections, like we described very well, the studio guest did, described really well about you call somebody and you say, this is Patrina, I'm friends with Dwayne. Oh, yeah. What can I do for you? And then you talk with that person. And those are really the backbone of your career search, to be honest. Because you can call that person, like Carl illustrated, use dignity with them, behave with dignity, and say, I saw that you're in engineering. I'm thinking about that field because I'm educated there, but I've been out for a while. What's changed? What's it like? They may say to you, look, you don't want to work for this company because here's what's about to happen. And they may, but they refer you somewhere else, or you refer them because their specialty is different. But we left the last one talking about family, extended family, hobbies. We all have hobbies and clubs that we've been involved with. And what are your hobbies in the studio? What's your hobby?
Fishing.
Fishing. What else?
Singing, dancing.
Singing, dancing, cooking. What else?
Jewelry making.
Jewelry making.
And
You
now
got a hobby?
I like watching old movies.
You like watching old movies,
Yeah.
all right?
And Jeopardy.
And Jeopardy. Yeah, I like Jeopardy.
It's been
Makes
really
me-
good this week.
Doesn't
It's
make me
been
feel
really good.
smart though. You got any hobbies?
Work.
Work. I knew you were going to
Yeah.
say that.
That's not a hobby.
Novella, you got a hobby?
Other than the public speaking, I've been doing meetup groups with different things like yoga, meditation.
Oh, meetup. I thought you said beat up. I'm sorry.
I was like, Fight Club, what?
So,
Let me sign up for that.
so you got groups that book clubs, whatever. But then you got drinking buddies. You say, well, I don't drink. I'm a fine, upstanding Southern lady. I don't drink.
Hey.
Okay,
wait, hold on.
so we all have drinking buddies. We may drink coffee instead of beer, but we got people that we have a drink with in that light. Here's the example of that shows the power of that group of people. How many in the studio, by snapping your fingers, have heard of the books and the movies Chronicles of Narnia?
Yay!
Great literature. How many have heard of the books and the movies The Lord of the Rings? Everybody. Well, do you know what they have as their common connection? In a place called the Eagle and Child in London, the author, C.S. Lewis of the Chronicles, and the author, J.R.R. Tolkien of the Lord of the Rings series, were part of a group of intellectual men who met regularly for beer and discussion in a pub called the Eagle and the Child.
Oh, wow.
They met, they shared ideas, they bounced plot ideas off one another, and from that relationship emerged two of the greatest pieces of literature and art probably in the history of the world. All from some drinking buddies.
The Inklings.
The Inklings, that's what they were called, the Inklings. So really think about those groups that you get together and just kind of hang out with. So you've got people we talked about who are like family, people you want to know. They would be an extended connection, but you may piece together, especially in the world of social media, that somebody you know knows them and you can get to know them better. Now here's one too that we mentioned social media. That's another podcast unto itself. And we really need to plan to do that and illustrate how to use and how to not use social media. You can get a job on social media. You can lose a job on
yes,
social
you can.
media.
Ah,
And
yeah.
we'll just hold that for another podcast. But think about not only people you know, but people you don't even like. How many of you are friends with somebody now or married to somebody now that when you met them you didn't really like them? Anybody? Who was it? Don't embarrass them, but you're friends with them now. Don't say me.
Honestly, I was friends with my husband before, but I did not like my husband.
Okay? You're,
And then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. Just
Yeah.
Stop being friends and got friendly.
I do have friends that
She
I
called that
really did not like at first. I was
Yeah.
just like, yeah.
one of,
I
one
got
of,
Facebook friends I still don't like now. Hey y'all, how you doing?
one of my closest like family friends, I did not like when I first met her. But I got to know her. Brene Brown says this, it's hard to hate up close, move in. It's hard to hate up close, move in. That is so valuable. But let me give you an example of not liking somebody and then it turning into a relationship. My son went to college his freshman year and was placed in class because he and a guy named Tom Duffy had pretty close to each other in their last names because it was a small group, D and B, so they're right there together. They ended up being assigned to sit beside each other in some of those big freshman classes. And they were in the same program, political science. My son is the most meek human you'll ever meet. He's just meek. Some of you know him. His name's Walter. He's very meek. He does not go for loud and boisterous. He's steady as she goes. He's much like me. No, I'm kidding.
I was gonna say, you should be used to that.
He's a lot like his mom, who's very meek, but not weak. There's a difference. Tom, on the other hand, is more like I am. He is just full of bunk. He is always telling a story, always making a joke, always. And Walter didn't really like him. He's like, man, I don't like that guy. But he was there. Every class he was showing up. So Walter got to know him. They became such good friends that Tom fell out of his bunk in we will call it a religious experience. Actually, it was a frat experience. You can build in it from there, whatever you want.
Learning experience.
Learning
nonetheless.
experience. Fell out of his bunk, caught his top bunk, caught his leg in the ladder, and hung upside down for a while, passed out until he hit the floor. Even with that grotesque injury, Tom came on crutches and stood up with my son as a groomsman at his wedding.
Wow.
3 years after they met. It's hard to hate up close, move in. Now I have to take one moment and tell this story about Tom because he dared me to do it. Tom would spin a story. Tom he missed a major exam that day. Major. He got out of it this way. He told the professor his father died.
Oh,
The
no.
professor said, Tom, that's fine. Just bring me the obituary. So Tom heads off
I didn't know
to Staples, buys some newsprint, creates an obituary, gives it to the professor, skates right through, graduates. Tom was so worried at their department graduation ceremony because I told him I was going to introduce myself to his professor as his father that he skipped his graduation. So Tom, it's out
You
there.
should have.
You-
I would have had some more harsh
Yeah.
words for him. That ain't no way to play.
So-
if anybody in this room has lost their daddy, that is not any way kind of to
That's
play.
right. So you got all these connections. This is my challenge to you. Think about business connections. Think about all those. Go to the website, the Facebook page, Getting Ahead, not just getting a job. Look at that circle of connectivity and build your own. You say, well, I'm not an artistic person. You can do what Trayvon did and write a song about it. That helped him get it in his mind. You can do what some have done and create a spreadsheet. But you really, with that many options, I can't imagine you coming away with fewer than 100 to 150 close and extended connections together. And what we're going to do now is break from this piece, come back and show you how to use those connections to begin seeking to build a career and not just find another job. So we'll wrap this piece. We'll come back a little bit later and finish this section on how to get a job, build a career, get ahead, and not just get a job. Welcome Welcome back. We're talking about with our group here in the studio about getting ahead, not just getting a job. And we closed our last session talking at some length about our own circles of connectivity. What does it mean to have a circle of connectivity? Well, that means you got a group of people that you're always developing. It's not something that's manipulative, it's relational. And a close connection, as we talked about, is somebody that you can just pick up the phone and call and go, hey, and they know who you are. An extended connection might mean that you need to say, hey, it's Dwayne, I'm friends with Michelle. Oh, yeah. And it kind of turns, you kind of turn the light on for them, is the best way to describe it. And then you call those people with purpose. And that's what we're going to talk about in this session, is how to take this social capital, this connectivity that you're building, and utilize it and employ it as a tool to help you find work. And the way we do that is probably the piece of this puzzle of finding a job that is the hardest. And that is starting to develop a plan. So, somebody said earlier, I think it was Karen, said, how'd you say that, Karen? You need to know what you want to do. You need a purpose.
Yeah, you need a reason, because you may. The hard part is that, okay, if you're being honest with yourself, I get a job because I need to survive. I need to pay bills. Okay, then your expectations, a lot of times, you go to work, so you know to be there on time, you know to do what you gotta do, and you don't get disappointed like, oh, I'm so bored here. You didn't come here because you didn't want to be bored. You came here because you wanted to pay bills.
Say that again. You
know,
didn't take this job.
Yeah, you didn't take this job for friends and family and luxury. You took this job because you have responsibility. Right. And a lot of times that's when people find themselves getting depressed, and their feelings are hurt a lot more easily because those expectations are not being met. But those weren't the expectations you should have had anyway. You came to work because you have to pay bills, you have to survive, you have people and things that depend on you. This was a job that you got because of the situation. This was not your lifelong dream. This was not the career you set out. This was not that. This was, this step that you need in your life to maintain, to hopefully, if you wanna do more or get more, and then once you figure that out and you say, okay, I'm working because I need to work, then what other plans can I put in place? Do I need to save a little, if I can save some money, so that if something happens here like happened at the last place, I got more time to work with, I got a little cushion. Do I need to learn why I'm here? Because this might be something I want to do later, and take this opportunity to pick up a few skills while I'm here.
That's right.
And be able to use that when I reword my resume to something else I'm doing. Right. If it's connections here, if you're working in the field where people come in, getting to know, like I said, those relationships, getting to know them so that when you do leave, or keep me in mind,
Well, and that's a great point, because you never stop building this circle of connectivity. That way, when you get surprised with a downsize or a business closes or a termination or even a relocation, maybe your spouse gets a job in another part of the country and you're like, man, we need to take that job, but I got to find a job within 60 days. You have those things. So the way to start this process is to sit down with a blank sheet of paper, a blank slate, a blank whiteboard, whatever, and list 5 places that you want to learn more about working. Maybe you want to work there, you're sure of it, you've seen it, you'd like to work there. More than likely, you just think, I'd like to know if I want to work there. Is that a place I want to invest my time? For some reason, this is a challenge for people. So let's talk about that for a second. Why is it hard to narrow it down and say, these are the 5 I want to work on first? Why is that a challenge for you? Some of you in the studio said off recording that you struggled a little bit with that. What are the fears about saying these are the first 5 I want to look at?
I think one of my main fears with that is that, okay, I've chosen X company. I get into X company and I hate X company because you don't always know the daily ins and outs or minute details of a job until you get there.
Right.
And I'd hate to go into a company that I'm really passionate about or really supportive of, and I get there and now I hate you, and I want to tell everybody that you're crap.
Yeah.
you know?
So so much in that statement. The encouragement I would have to us is this: whether you work at ABC or XYZ or 1, 2, 3 company, you're still going to have the same basic sets of people around you. You're going to have bad managers and good managers. You're going to have bad companies and good companies. If you can focus on your capacities, your abilities, perform your job, realize it's not your job or my job to change that company unless I'm signing the checks. It's my job to do my job well. You say, well, what if they're dishonest or unethical or illegal? It's still my job to do my job well. And if I have to be a whistleblower, I'll be a whistleblower. But there's a procedure for that. But don't take on trying to fix a bad company. And don't leave a bad company. It's one of the things I respect about Novella. She's in a tough job now. It's a hard job. But she's not leaving until she has something lined up. Because it's harder to find work when you're unemployed. So that's a legitimate challenge. What are some other reasons that it's hard for you to say, these are 5 places I want to focus on, not exclusively, but I want to focus there first? Star, you struggled a little bit to get there. What was the struggle?
The struggle for me is, I think I was closed-minded when you asked the question. So I was more like, well, I'm in the entrepreneur mindset. So I don't want to go work at a job right now. I just can't. But then I started thinking, but what other avenues did you want to go in? And then it kind of started coming clear to me, like, oh wait, I've sat and thought about this a little bit.
Yeah.
I know what I kind of want to write down. So
What is the place that you wrote down when I said, name a place that you'd like to either work or learn more about, or a connection you would like to make?
So I kind of have both. I have connections and areas. So I really want to get into real estate. Real estate is a big thing for me. I've wanted to do it for years.
Right?
And I think I've now gotten to the place where I've researched enough where I'm just like, no, just go ahead and do it. Get in there, get your license. But another thing that I want to do, going off of my organization, is connecting with more interpreters
Okay.
and being able to create a program within them.
And
So
your organization is for help serving the deaf community.
it's for serving the deaf community. So connecting with churches, connecting with interpreters, all that in one sense of being able to create a program,
Right.
you know.
So let's look at Star's circle of connectivity. She's done it. She's done part of it here in the studio, made some notes. Let's go to real estate. You're interested in real estate. You have some interest in that, genuine interest. It's not just a curiosity. Who in your either close connections or extended connections would you consider well-versed in real estate? Maybe they work in that field, they used to work in it, whatever, and just use their first name.
Actually, I have 2 in mind. I have Miss Kamisha, which she is the owner of a real estate, well, I guess you would say broker of a real estate. And then I have Adina,
Adina, okay, when we mentioned earlier,
right,
yeah.
who is really doing well for herself in that industry. So those are like my 2 connections that
So
I know I can just call up right now.
Kamisha is, and I don't have a clue, I just butchered her name, but
That's
It kind of looks right
am I
now.
saying it right?
Let's see what's wrong when I say
It's not spelled right, but you're saying it right.
Okay, Kamisha, we're audio, so we're good.
Right.
It's better than a C, because
So
the C was way wrong.
Kamisha is a close connection.
Yes, she is.
Adina is an extended connection.
I would probably say Adina's a close connection too. I know I can pick up my phone right now and be like, Adina, it's Star. And we can probably talk for a good 45 minutes
So,
before hitting off anything else.
Let's talk about approaching a close connection.
Mm-hmm.
If you call most close connections and say, hey, I need a job, you're going to really put them on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it this way. What if that nephew of yours that has not done great in the job world, he's okay, but he's not that mature, calls you and says, hey, I need a job. Are you going to be really comfortable endorsing him? Maybe not. What if your best friend calls and says, I need a job? Well, you may think, well, we've got an opening, but do I want to work with my best friend? I don't want to risk that relationship if something goes sour at work. A family member. Well, if we start
Oh, it's
working
so different
together,
now.
yeah, if somebody dies in our family, we're both going to have to be off at the same time. Now all of a sudden we got challenges in a small company.
Right.
So you think, and some companies even have rules against that. What's it called? Nepotism. Is that right? So
Or you get your best friend a job and they come to work and walk out in the middle of a shift and don't tell anybody they're leaving.
now that's come up twice in our discussion. So we're going to have to deal with that, aren't we? Yeah, but
I mean, that's why you don't get your friend's job.
yeah. So and there's great truth to that.
It is.
So you call Kamisha or you call Adina. What would your first call look like under the getting ahead, not just getting a job
So
model?
what I would probably do is if I gave Kamisha a call and say, hey Kamisha, I have watched you, I've watched your Facebook page, I've seen you have great success in this, and I'm really interested in getting into real estate. Is there anything any tips or advice that you can give me, to get into this area? And I would just kind of let it roll from there.
That's a perfect way to do it. You have called out or tapped into her expertise. You've treated her as a valued resource. You've treated her as an expert, and then let the conversation roll.
Mm-hmm.
So what was yours, Novella? You said,
I have industries rather than,
so what industry?
so the first and foremost is public speaking, because that's my dream.
Okay,
Then it's peer counseling, I was trying to do that for a while.
right,
Anything marketing or creative, artwork, even like restoring furniture, maybe not as a career, like a side hustle, I don't know.
right.
I like it.
And
Right.
most people, many people, I don't know that most, but many people today are working multiple part-time jobs to have full-time income.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the refinishing furniture.
Okay.
Okay, let's pick that one out. Who do you know who does that? Anybody?
Me?
Okay, so Carl does it. Who else do you know?
So I used to work
Refurbish those.
for a company, the pest control,
Right?
and one of the franchise owners owns a leather store in Hickory.
Okay,
So like literally, he makes the leather for the furniture.
okay. So that's an extended connection, right?
Mhm. And he loved it.
And let's call him John. That'll be his first name.
If
all
he
right?
loves you, that was a close connection.
So,
I mean,
so if you were to call John and say to him, John, this is Novella. I met you when I was working with XYZ company up there that you own the franchise for. I got a couple questions about your business. Can you give me a minute? Sure. Then you just ask. I love the idea of doing furniture refinishing. I like working with my hands like that. What can you tell me about it? Is it something, can I make a living in it? Do I need to look at it as a hobby? What do I need to do? Just get him talking about it.
Okay.
And then let that roll into a conversation. Now you learn some things. You can call Carl and have the same discussion. And now you've got this pool of knowledge. And you can decide if you want to pursue it. You take it to the next step. So let's look at how that might look. That's a good conversation. Let's look at one that's not as positive. Let's suppose that you call John, you have the same discussion. What can you tell me? What do you think? And he says this. He says, Novella, listen to me. People in today's world, and I don't know if this is true or not, but let's suppose this is the reality. He says, in today's world, they're not refinishing furniture. They're throwing it away. The new furniture is not worth keeping to refinish. If you're going to do this, you're going to have a hard time making a living. Now, if you want to mine out at antique stores and find good furniture and refinish it, I can teach you how to do that, but you're going to have to do an awful lot of that to make a living. You have that conversation, and you come back and you go, you know what? I'm not interested in that because I don't want to work that hard for that tiny amount of money. You may call Carl and say, here's what this guy told me. You think that's the case? You think he's right? You come to the conclusion, no, that's not it. You take furniture refinish off your list and you plug another one in. And what would your next one be? Public speaking?
Yes.
So, who do you know that makes a living as a public speaker? Anybody? Me? Well, yeah. So that's a close connection. All right. Who else do you know? Anybody? that that gets paid to
Is there a child in
speak?
there? Is it mine?
Do you know anybody that gets paid to speak besides me?
Not,
Her?
there we go.
Yeah, so she gets paid. So you could call her as a close connection because you and I have a relationship. I may not think of it as broadly as she would. Who in your... Okay, now if you're listening on the podcast, that means that sound is our 2-minute warning. We've got 2 minutes to finish this podcast for you. So we're going to move to the close, and then we'll wrap it up with maybe one more to wrap this whole thing for us that we've done 6 sessions on. So we're back to Novella. I do some public speaking. By the way, if you want to get me at Resource Connection, Gateway.com, I'll be glad to make you a contract. All right, that's ResourceConnectionGateway.com.
Please donate. Look, they're gonna and please donate and support all the businesses.
So, who do you know that might know a public speaker that gets paid to speak?
Well, now I'm gonna say Michelle.
Michelle. So let's say either Michelle or me.
Star.
Or Star. Let's say I give you a name of a friend of mine who does a lot of this. Her name is Jennifer. You could call Jennifer and say, Jennifer, this is Novella. I'm friends with Dwayne, and she's going to hang up. No, she's going to talk to me. She's going to talk. Jennifer's one of the people I didn't like too much till I got to know her. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? So
Yeah,
you know why I didn't like her, right? No, I'm kidding. I love Jennifer. She's like my great grandmother. So,
Oh, wow. He threw the extra right in there.
so you can call Jennifer
That's not old, that's wisdom.
and say,
Hey, that's what I
Jennifer,
said this
I'm
was.
friends with Dwayne. I've got this story. I won't tell you the whole story, but I can give you enough pieces to know I've got a story I want to tell. How could I become a paid public speaker to do that? And she's going to give you some great advice. And she's going to tell you the hard things and the easy things. And there's not a lot of easy in it because it's hard to get paid to speak. Very hard. So are you seeing here in the studio and as the listeners how you can capitalize on your close and your extended connections? And often, as you saw illustrated this morning, your extended connections suddenly become over time, not suddenly, but over time, become close connections. So
Then you make other extended connections.
that's right,
from
and
that.
it just keeps growing. It's a web, and that's why we call it a circle of connectivity, because it's not a pure circle, it's a web. And oftentimes, if you just look at that, you think, well, it's so vast, I don't know what to do. Here's how you step. Have you ever, when you were a kid, did you ever go into the woods and walk across a creek or stream
Oh,
by
Yeah.
stepping on the rocks?
Yep.
That's what your connections do. They become your stepping stones to get you across sometimes tough
Oh,
water
without getting your feet wet.
without
Oh,
getting
wait.
your feet wet. That's right. And when you
That's a good way to think of it.
decide when you're going to get in the water and get your feet wet. So good talk, good information. We've reached our time limit and gone over just a little bit. But we're going to come back in a few minutes, post this last one together, and wrap everything we've talked about. All right? So come back. ResourceConnectionGateway.com. So welcome back. We're in this studio. We've been here through several sessions. This is kind of the wrap session for getting ahead, not just getting a job. And we've talked about a lot. Let me ask in the studio, the things we've talked about, what has been a single piece that you said, that makes sense? Somebody tell us, what's something that made you go, never thought of it quite that way before? What is something? Tell me.
That last thing you just said about walking across the creek without getting your feet wet.
So what do I mean by that? What's that mean?
Stepping stones and meeting people and knowing people and having connections in different places.
Yep,
So you were set up for success rather than failure.
that's right. And you decide when to get in the water. What'd you say, Carl?
I said sometimes you think the stone's stable and so you step out and you get your feet wet.
No, yeah.
That's right.
Some of
So
it
you back
slip.
up. And that's what Chad would have said, was indicating earlier when we talked about him as the pilot. Sometimes you have to change your plan midstream and go, or mid-flight, and say, I hope it's not midstream if you're a pilot. But if you have to change plans. You have to say, wait a minute, this isn't working. So all of that being said, your social or your circle of connectivity becomes your partners. They become your partners in helping you get through this and move to the next level. And it's a never-ending cycle. You're always building, always adding to your circle, and adding value to people's lives. You have value, and when people get to know you, they get benefit. And always remember that. I think when you lose a job, it's hard to remember. I have value. I have things to contribute, especially, or you're stuck in a job that's killing you. What else stood out? Misty said the stepping stone thing. What else?
I think the approach to networking or having your close relationships, the way that Karen and Star broke it down in a way where you're taking the pressure off of them and letting them know, like, I value you
Right.
as a connection
That's
rather
right.
than I need you to help me now.
Yeah.
You know, taking that pressure off, I think, takes it to a whole new level.
And that's a great point, because people will feel exploited, manipulated, used. They'll be like, well, you only call me when you need something.
Right.
Well, no, I'm calling you because I value your input. And, that's really an important piece. I had not thought of the value of that maybe as much until we talked about it here. So we've talked about the value of your relationships, the value of each person. We've talked about building your own circle so that you have control of it. And again, we need to do a whole social media podcast just on that. But the value of the relationships, the stepping stone idea, what else really stood out to you as something you can engage with and employ in your own search for career or to build your current positions and work? Anything that stood out? Do you have something?
I think it's okay to be open that you can do other things or want other things in places of jobs.
Yeah.
But then the responsibility of that is that in having value,
Yep.
in knowing that you may have been given opportunities to do other things or be doing other things, thanks to folks opening those doors for you or having those connections, is that we have to make space for other people. They want to be entrepreneurs. The problem is knowing one.
Yep.
Knowing one that looks or acts like you, knowing one that thinks like you, but also how do you get started in that? And so we have to make space for people to be able to tell their stories,
That's right.
and then connect that to how that makes life experience, work experience, and where that value is, and being able to rename it.
That's right.
And also, like I said, a lot of people want to. They may not think that they will ever have the opportunity to, or they don't know.
That's
Yeah,
right.
now that we know each other, we know we're everyday people.
That's right.
And, we're just people,
And you mentioned
But-
that word entrepreneur.
yeah.
We heard that a lot. An entrepreneur without social capital and physical capital is just a dreamer. And will be frustrated over and over and over. And there's nothing wrong with dreaming, but you've got to have a plan. Maybe a better way to say that is an entrepreneur without a plan is a dreamer. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
I agree with you on that. That plan is key.
Yeah.
Because you can have a lot of social capital that can stand in for your financial capital
Right.
while you're getting
That's right.
started. And that's what happened, with our nonprofit, is that we had really nothing. Everything was being paid for out of our pocket.
Yep.
But because of our social capital and those
Yep.
connections, they were willing to take a risk on us.
That's right.
That has allowed us then to be able to take a risk on some other folks that has been beneficial.
And I think an example of in my life and work with the Resource Connection Gateway of social capital filling in where there was no financial capital to do what we needed to do, nor did we have the expertise, is in my relationship with Michelle. We encountered a person who they were living in a hotel. We weren't sure that she wasn't maybe being sex trafficked. We just weren't sure. We couldn't tell. In a casual conversation, I realized that Michelle's work ministry will go into a hotel and blanket the entire hotel with resources. And we're not talking about the Marriott. We're talking about sort of long stay where you have a lot of homeless people, a lot of stuff in and out, and it creates a culture of potential for abuse. There were children involved. I can go to bed at night now knowing that her ministry went in there and offered everybody help, and I know she was offered it, and at least we've done that. We didn't have the financial resources, the insurance, anything to do that, but that connection made it happen. So I do think a better way to say what I was trying to say is an entrepreneur without a plan is just a dreamer, and there's nothing wrong with being a dreamer, but you can't live on dreams. You got to pay the bills. So I hope this material's been helpful. What I hope you'll do is listen to the podcast. We're going to build, they may be there by the time you hear this, but we're going to build some surveys to be at the end of them so that you can respond and get in touch. If you're in our local area, we have immediate resources for you to help you. If you're outside our local area, we may have to do a little work to connect you, but we'll do what we can to offer you supports also. But this has been getting ahead, not just getting a job. And it's part of the work of the Resource Connection Gateway. You can find these podcasts at resourceconnectiongateway.com. They'll be up and you'll be able to find them. And we're excited about offering them. Come back often because we'll be putting these on Podbean and places like that along with others. We're getting ready to break and with this great group, while we have them together, we're going to do a roundtable discussion on some social justice issues. And the topic for today is, what does wellness look like? We're going to talk about that. So thanks again for checking us out, and we'll hear from you at resourceconnectiongateway.com.